Denny, take us back to pre-Ohio State Bar Association, before you became executive director in 1980. What was your background career-wise before you came here?
Well, I, first of all, went to Ohio University, graduated with a degree in business administration, finished up, came to Columbus, didn't have a job, looked around, and I kept waiting for people to beat my door down to hire me, and it didn't really happen. So I had to go out and look for a job. And when I did, I was administrative manager of a public warehouse over on Columbus's west side. Didn't really care that much for that job, but I stayed there for 2.5 years. And when I started looking around, the Ohio Society of Certified Public Accountants was looking for somebody to run their continuing education program. We got together, and I found that I liked association work. I was with them for about 7.5, maybe 8 years, and got to the point where I wanted to have my own, I wanted to be the executive director, or at least have a career path that would take me to executive director. The executive director at the CPA Society was only 20 years older than I, and I couldn't see me waiting around for him to retire. So, and I'm fast forwarding just a little bit, but I became aware of the Ohio State Bar Association job as assistant executive director. I got together with Joe Miller and their search committee, and they ended up offering me the job, fortunately for me.
So 1980, assistant executive director
Right.
for the Ohio State Bar Association. A few years later then, executive director. Tell me a little bit about how that came about. Because
the process?
As you mentioned, Joe Miller was the executive director at the time.
He was. And the way that worked is when I was hired, they didn't really say it quite like this, but they said, you know, if things go well, when Joe retires, if things have gone well, you will be looked at seriously for the job. And I thought, well, that's good. So things must have gone well, because one day when Joe was 65 years old, almost 65, we had an executive committee meeting, which that's what the board used to be called, the executive committee, and I changed it. They went into executive session, threw everybody on the staff out, and about, I don't know, a half hour later, they came out and started shaking my hand. I said, you know, for what? And they said, well, we just decided you're going to be the next executive director. I didn't even know that was on the table. No, I would have been nervous if I'd thought that. So that's how that whole thing transpired. A lot different than what we're looking at today.
The process is a little different.
A lot different.
A little different. So 1986, executive director. How have things changed for the profession and the association in that time between then and now?
Well, I think the association has gone through some pretty big changes in terms of the number of staff people, the things that we do, the number of, the types of affiliates that we have and what they do. But I think the profession has seen a pretty big change as well. Back then, there were a whole lot of young lawyers. You know, it was kind of the baby boom group going through the Python. And today, those same people who used to be young lawyers are now the old lawyers. They're getting to be, you know, what we would call older lawyers, and that's where a large group of folks are in the profession right now. It's known as the graying of the profession. I think the other thing too. Now, not being a lawyer, and never having practiced law, I'm just telling you what I have heard in speaking with other people, but I think that there was more of a reluctance back in the early years, in the 80s, to look at the practice of law as a business. And I think now, while it's still a profession, and obviously we always want it to be a profession, I think people are paying a little more attention to the business side of it than they had to maybe in 30 years ago.
What about for the association in the 30 years plus that you have been here? What do you point to and say, that is what I'm the most proud of?
We've done quite a bit. But the thing I'm most proud of is the staff, because the staff has made it all happen. And our ability to attract and retain terrific staff people, I think, has been certainly my proudest achievement.
Has there been anything that you wish that you could have done over again? Any type
Oh,
of regret?
not really, no real regrets, but I think that, certainly, if you go back, you might say, if I would have done this differently or that differently. But on the whole, in terms of projects and things like that, I think no. I think we've done a lot of things that have made a difference, and we've been cutting edge on a lot of things as well.
Is there anything in particular in regard to that you are
Cutting
most
edge
proud
stuff?
of? Yeah.
Two things that I'm particularly proud of. Yes, OPEN was the first thing. OPEN stood for Online Professional Electronic Network. We started that back in the 90s. I think it was the 90s. And we had $1 million in it. And we had some partners who were providing the technological expertise, and we were providing the credibility with the state agencies, because it was a method by which lawyers, and we did it for lawyers, could get public information from state agencies through their computer. Until we did that, they had to make a call. If they wanted a Bureau of Motor Vehicles form or something, they had to have a call, and they might be on the line for maybe 45 minutes before they got to talk to a human being. This was a way to use the computer to do that. It went so well, we found out that lawyers weren't the only people who wanted access to that service. And we expanded the kind of information that was available. So for instance, not just Bureau of Motor Vehicles, but arrest records and things like that. And we found that banks and insurance companies and rental car places wanted that kind of information as well. So our partners said, let's take this national. And we said, to do that, we'd have to put extra money in it. And we decided instead to just sell out to the partners. So we had $1 million in it, and we got $7 million back. So that was a home run, a financial home run, and the service is still there for lawyers and others. Mm-hmm. The other thing would be CaseMaker, which I think needs no introduction. It's online computer-assisted legal research that is worth way more than anybody has to pay in dues.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think that I've heard through the years that I've been here, which is a drop in the bucket compared to how long you've been here, is that the dues for an Ohio State Bar Association member is, so affordable, really, mm-hmm. for all of the things that you get. Mm-hmm. And I get the sense that most people say that is because of your leadership.
Well, thank you. I don't know that I can take all the credit. I'd like to point back to the staff that I mentioned before. And the other thing, too, that I've always said is one of the key ingredients for our success is that there's a good hand-in-glove relationship between the board and the staff, because the board gives the staff, and I like to give the staff, what I call permission to fail. And by that I mean, don't be afraid to go out and try an entrepreneurial project just because you think that there's a chance that it might not work. If you do all your research and it looks like, first and foremost, it will result in something that's going to help lawyers and members in their practices, and you think there's at least a reasonable chance and probability that it's going to be successful, even though there might be a little bit of a risk involved, don't be afraid to take that, because I'd rather see somebody try and fail than to say, I don't want to stick my toe in the water because there might be an alligator in there. So I think that's been part of the reason we've been successful. And so what happened was, in developing that kind of a culture, and I've been a part of that development, but when we get to that kind of a culture, in order to get there, you have to have little successes along the way, and each success kind of builds on the other. And so when something big comes up, like investing $1 million in OPEN, or investing in the time and effort to do CaseMaker, you know, that the board is pretty comfortable letting the staff take that and run with it. So it's a team effort. And while I would like to think that I've had some part of it, in some part of the reason that it's successful, you know, I still have to share it with the team.
The Ohio State Bar Association, when you go outside the borders of the state of Ohio, has been recognized for excellence in whether it's the individual programming, the benefits for its membership. It really has risen to the top among other state bar associations. Why do you think that the Ohio State Bar Association has that national recognition?
Well, first of all, I love to take our leaders to national meetings of bar associations because, you know, I think sometimes when they hear us talk about us being number one, they might think it's a little self-serving. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. But when they get there, they find other people telling them the same thing and asking what we're doing, wanting to know what we're doing next because the other bar associations are probably thinking, well, you know, we might want to do that sometime in the future. We do have a national reputation, and it's well deserved, in my opinion. But again, it goes back to that culture that I talked about with respect to the board, the staff, and the entrepreneurial culture that's been built in between the two. I think that's the main thing. The other thing is that we, a few years ago, we went through an exercise to discover our core purpose and our core values and to come up with what we call a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. And the fact that we know our core purpose and gear everything toward accomplishing that purpose gives us an incredible leg up. There are so many bar associations, and not just bar associations, so many associations out there who really don't know. I mean, I've asked other bar associations, what is your core purpose? And I get about 6 or 7 things, all of which are strategic rather than a purpose. And so I think knowing that, gearing everything toward that, having a strategic plan, which we do, and a yearly operational plan, which we also do, that is geared toward the strategic plan, leads us in the right path, and we're very businesslike about the whole thing. That's another thing too. I talked about the practice of law being seen as a business. There are a lot of people who don't think that the association ought to be run like a business. I totally disagree with that. You know, I think we always have to look at what it is we're doing, what are the resources that are going to be needed to accomplish the goals, and what's the best way to go about bringing things together for the members of the Ohio State Bar Association.
Speaking of the members of the State Bar Association, and even the lawyers in Ohio who may not be members, what's one thing that you would like for them to know about their association?
That we're always looking to enhance their professional lives. In fact, that's the purpose that we discovered, is that the Ohio State Bar Association exists to enhance the professional lives of its members. And that's what we're always trying to do. That and I would also like for them to know that the money they pay in dues would come back in a multiple based on the benefits that are available to them. Like, for instance, Casemaker, the Green Book, Ohio Lawyer, our actions down at the State House, and with judicial organizations. There are just too many things to talk about right now in this short period of time that we have, but somebody once told me you can't sell from an empty wagon, and I said, you know, that makes sense, and our wagon is certainly not empty.
There has been, in the last several decades, kind of this trend toward a public outlook toward lawyers, and it's not very positive.
Right.
They're ranked right around the politicians, which isn't very high either.
Unfortunately.
It is unfortunate.
It is.
What can the association, or what has the association, what should the association do to continue to fight that negative image for lawyers?
Well, I think I'd like to say a couple of things about that. Number one, one of our past presidents, Dick Marcus, once told me, and I believe this, that part of the negative image toward lawyers stems from the fact that some people don't like the law as it affects them, and they want to blame the lawyer for, how that might impact on their lives. The other thing is that I think, and this is my own opinion, I'm not sure it's shared by everybody, but most people come in contact with the legal profession when they're getting a divorce, and nobody's ever happy. Either side is happy at the end of that. And so I tend to think that a lot of people's negative thoughts come from their personal experience in the courts because of that. That's unfortunate. I think we just continually do good things and tell people about it. We continue to have good public relations programs. We continue to encourage lawyers to be active in civic affairs and in their school system and out in the community. And then people, because when you ask people, well, what do you think about lawyers? Oh, my God, and well, do you have a lawyer? Well, I sure do, and he or she is great, but the rest of them, I don't have any use for. And that's kind of the thought process that you get when you talk with people about their opinion of lawyers in the legal profession.
When we talked about the national recognition for the Ohio State Bar Association, there have been many national awards. Is there one in particular that really stands out to you as being not the most important? I don't want to say that necessarily, but one that you are particularly proud of?
All of them have been special, but I think the Ohio Bar Medal, I'd have to single that out as the one in particular that's most meaningful to me, because it's the highest award of the Ohio State Bar Association, and I'm the only non-lawyer ever to receive it. So that meant a great deal to me to receive that.
Were you surprised when you received it?
I was very surprised when I received it. When I was informed that I was getting it, I was taken aback and pretty much speechless for a few minutes, which almost never happens.
In fact, we have a picture of you on the table here where
That's
you're
right.
holding your
That's
medal.
me, yes.
And we also have some other important people in your life.
Yes, my children are there. This is my son and my daughter, and this is the three of us in my backyard. So yes, they're very important to me. And in fact, as I've told other people, I've always wanted them to be proud of me, and I hope they are.
I think they are. I've seen them.
I hope so.
I've seen them. They practically grew up while they were.
Oh, they did.
While you were here at the State Bar Association.
Well, my son wasn't born until after I had taken the job, and he's 30, almost 31 now. So
yeah. There's also another piece here that you felt was important to bring with you today. Tell me a little bit about the penguin.
Okay. When my predecessor, Joe Miller, we had a retirement dinner for him, and we were giving him gifts, and I gave him a great big Hershey bar that was like 35 pounds or something like that, because he loved chocolate. And he gave me this, and because I was taking over, and he said that the name of this piece of art is called Whoops, because the penguin has slipped and he's kind of skidding along. And he said, during your term here, there are going to be times when you're going to go, whoops, and that was the significance of that. So that's why I wanted that to be here. That's kind of a connection to the past, to Joe Miller, who was here for 38 years. And by the way, this is kind of remarkable. The Ohio State Bar Association is 133 years old, and I'm only the third executive director. So kind of amazing, and I doubt that my predecessor is going to be here 38 years, although I might be surprised. Or not my predecessor, my successor.
Right. So speaking of the next executive director for the Ohio State Bar Association, this might be a good time to go ahead and in the 30 plus years that you've been here, I'm sure you've learned a lot. You've grown as an executive director from the time you started in 1980 to 2013. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your successor and help them get started?
I'd tell them to first and foremost enjoy every day of it. You get to work with some terrific people. I'd say be flexible, roll with the punches, and don't be afraid to go in there and fight for what's right. Because, as I've always told people here, in any given situation, there's the high road and then there are all the others. Always take the high road. It may not feel great at the time. You may want revenge, or you may want another road for some particular reason. But in the long run, you'll never regret taking the high road. And that would be it.
Has there been anyone in particular that has inspired you during your career here at the State Bar Association?
I think I'd have to go back and say what I said before about always wanting my children to be proud of me. So they would probably be the first, but there are so many people who have had an impact on my career here that it would be just about impossible for me to name any one in particular. Somebody asked me the other day, did you always see yourself as being the executive director of an association? No, I didn't see myself working for an association at all. Nobody goes, some people might. Hardly anybody goes to college thinking, I'm going to be an association executive. But to be honest with you, I never saw myself as anything other than the CEO of wherever it was that I was going to end up. Whether it would be, when I was in college, somebody said, well, what do you want to do when you're 55? I want to be president of General Motors. Thank God that didn't happen. but certainly I wanted to be in the top spot, and I made it here, and it's just been terrific for me. I've loved every day of it, and I hope I've done some good.
And would you have dreamed that you would have been here this long? That you would have pretty much started your career and pretty much ended it here?
I kind of did. And no, I didn't think I'd be here this long. But it's been so great, and we've been able to do so many wonderful things that have been exciting for me, and I think have done some good for the profession that there was no reason to leave.
So what are your plans for retirement? Are you going to retire?
Going to retire, and I already have Denny Ramey Association Consulting LLC set up. One of our past presidents, Tom Bonacera, did that for me, and as I told somebody else, if nobody calls, I'm not going to care. But I hope somebody calls. I'm going to play more golf. Somebody said that's kind of impossible, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'll play at different times during the day. And I'm going to do community theater, or I'm going to try to do community theater.
Really?
We'll see how that works.
Okay. There have been a couple of things that have happened before you retire. One of them is a renaming of the Boardroom here at the Ohio State Bar Association to the Denny L. Ramey Boardroom.
Yes.
So your name is now immortalized on the wall.
Yes, that's very nice.
And also the State Bar Foundation has put together a fund. Tell me a little bit about what that fund is going to be able to do.
Well, the Denny L. Ramey Education Fund, I think that's the correct name of the foundation's fund, is for students in southeastern Ohio, Appalachia. I didn't realize I came from Appalachia until I was in college, but with a concentration, I think, in Portsmouth, which is my hometown. And I'm very proud of that because, again, that's kind of an immortalizing thing with your name on a scholarship fund. And it's going to do good things for some folks down there. And I've seen firsthand what the importance of education is to me, certainly for me. And I want to make sure that I'm doing something, or that the foundation I'm proud that the foundation is doing something to help those who are in that particular geographic area to learn more about the law and to have some learning opportunities as well.
You still have a lot of pride in where you've come from.
I do. My dad still lives there. I mean, he's 94 and still lives in the same house that he's lived in since he was 3 years old, hard to believe, and where I grew up. And this is home, but that's where I came from.
I don't want to make this sound like it's morbid, so there's my preface.
Sure.
If you were to have people say, one particular thing about Denny L. Ramey and his time here at the Ohio State Bar Association, what do you want to be remembered for?
You know, I think probably that he always kept his eye on the ball with respect to the members of the OSBA.
Anything else that you wanted to add about your time?
Now, it's been great. I'm excited for my successor, because whoever gets this job is going to get one of the best jobs in the world. I'm going to continue to be available to him or her by phone. I'm not going to come in here every day. In fact, I'm not going to come in at all unless invited. And I'm just excited for the person who gets this job, and I'm excited for the next stage of my life as well.